It's not prescribed for males on a long-term basis.
Well, little boy, this would be for, yeah, I don't know that, but you can buy it, over the counter for
But if a
We need to
child,
talk to pediatricians. Go ahead.
yeah, if a child is deficient in iron, the body will actually mistake the lead for iron. So that's partly why
it decreases the absorption. So if your child's in that hazardous environment and they're sufficient in their iron, like she was saying, the likelihood of them absorbing more iron is less. Because I have had a lot of families that have confused the iron vitamin with the actual medication that's used to remove the lead from the body. So I try to explain that to them. It's very important, like she said, very important.
Well, also calcium is very important.
Absolutely.
Because then the bones won't absorb the lead.
Okay, it's Daniel's turn. He's going to tell us about the city's lead grant and how many CDCs.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah. So in the interest of full disclosure, I'm a sub for someone else. I didn't know I was going to be giving a presentation today, so I'm just going to shoot from the hip, but that's what I do. So as was mentioned before, the city has a couple of different lead programs, actually. We've got the health department, and then we've got the Department of Trade and Development, formerly Community Development, soon to be Community and Economic Development. And what our program focuses on is we collaborated with the health department, and we basically looked at the areas of the city that had instances of high lead poisoned children. And so we decided to do a targeted approach and focus our grant efforts in those specific neighborhoods. So anybody who's driven around Cincinnati can tell you that we have a lot of old housing stock, and that's a great thing, but it's also a not so great thing when you're discussing lead poisoning. You know, if we were in Phoenix, Arizona, we wouldn't even be here. This wouldn't be a conversation. But we're in Cincinnati, and a lot of our housing stock is of a certain age. Now, when you take the housing stock and you look at it, and then you look at the income of individuals that are living in that housing stock, you find that there's a direct relationship between individuals that have less disposable income are living in older homes. Therefore, they have a higher instance of exposure to lead paint, and that can lead to all the issues that we discussed today. So the city, we're wrapping up right now. In 2012, we got a $3 million grant to do lead hazard reduction and abatement. And luckily for us today, I've got Steve McNamee from People Work Cooperative. They're one of our grant partners. So they do our intake of applicants, and they also have a separate crew that bids on jobs to do the abatement. In particular, the city has worked with a couple of the CDCs here in town, and as a rule of thumb, the average per house that we typically spend is about $10,000. Sometimes we do a little bit more, sometimes we do a little bit less, but in a typical house in Cincinnati, a lot of the lead houses that you're going to find are going to be on the friction and impact surfaces. So the edge of doors, steps, and the windows. A lot of the older windows have lead paint. Slide those up and down, get the dust, and then that's how that's the trail for how the poisoning occurs. So what our program does is we go in, we do the risk assessment, and I'm a licensed risk assessor as well. We do the lead paint inspection, we go through that whole process, and then once we get the results back and we see what surfaces have lead-based paint, we then come up with a plan for how we're going to address that house. Now let me just preface this by saying that if a surface is lead but it's intact, then that's better. I don't want to say it's not a hazard, but it's not as hazardous as a surface that's lead that's not intact. That's kind of beat up a little bit. So it's perfectly, you can find a house that's really well painted, it's lead paint, but if it's all intact, it's not as much of a hazard as it is if it's old and poorly maintained. So the way that we've done it in the past, I think we addressed about The previous grant, we had about 3 million, and we did 200, I want to say 70 units or so, and that's kind of about where we try to stay. And then this grant that's wrapping up, I want to say that we're going to hit in the 250s, 260s, I think. So we've done a lot of work with Over the Rhine Community Housing. We've got a lot of multifamily stuff that's in Over the Rhine. And Price Hill Will, which is, Price Hill's one older neighborhood, and there's a lot of lead-based paint there. We've done work with Wynn, working neighborhoods. We've done from South Cumminsville, College Hill, and, who am I leaving now? But anyway, what we've done typically with our funds, we've piggybacked on a lot of existing programs. So the NSP, Neighborhood Stabilization Program, that was going on for a while, we tried to mix and match and layer funds to make sure that if you've got an NSP home that's got lead issues in it, we can take care of that. And the positive side of doing that was that now that becomes a home that a lower income family would have to purchase because it's tied to the lead fund. So we're eradicating lead, we're also creating affordable housing kind of at the same time. So that's kind of our holistic approach to that. Let's see, I kind of would want to hear from you guys as to what your interests are and see if I can kind of shoot and address some of those. I'm more of a technical in the field guy, so if there's any
How long
questions.
does it take to get through that lead process?
The length. Steve, you want to do that? Because Steve is in the process from the intake to the end, so.
I guess it takes about I'm guessing about a month to get a risk assessment back once an application's been placed in. And then all that's left is scheduling the work. We usually complete a project within a week. We try to keep it condensed, keep the client out of their home for as short a period as possible. And so I'm guessing usually it's just 2 to 3 months, mostly from the time they apply to the time they're getting clearance and back in their homes.
Yeah, and we try to do a lot of the intake and stuff during the winter when there's not as much work going on because you can't paint, an exterior in the winter. So we do a lot of the intake then, and then now we're going gangbusters. So Steve and I have a couple houses we have to go visit next week, and so the process takes about, as Steve said, about 2 to 3 months from start to finish. And that is also depending on the size of the home. But with a lead paint, with a lead paint risk assessment, they have to test every painted surface in the house. So even if you walk in and you know it's not lead, you still have to test it just because that's the federal regulations require us to do so.
Is your work with lead only related to the grants? And also, as we already said this, what's the difference in the clientele between your work and the health department?
Well, our clientele, the health department, they deal specifically with cases of lead poisoning, right?
Not just specifically, anyone can apply.
Yeah.
Anyone within the city of Cincinnati.
Yeah, but we typically do not deal with lead. A home that has lead orders on it, we typically will kick that to the health department just because of all the other issues involved. So our clientele is 80% of the area median income is the limit. So that's pretty much anybody who's 80% below that lives in the lead target areas. So.
But what do you actually do when you get that information? I know the health department, they deal with lead ingestion part. Well, what exactly do you guys do?
What do we do with?
I mean, like you come out, you find a house with lead.
Right.
Say you and what's the name going out. What prompted you guys to go to these houses to do your work?
Okay.
What gets you there?
Well, we did a world tour of all the community councils, and we went out and said, hey, if you've got a house built before '78 and you've got old wooden windows and you see flaking paint, chances are you may have lead. And if that's the case, you need to call us because we want to, handle that before you get to the point where your child is lead poisoned. Now, there are instances where we get there and we don't have the authority necessarily to tell somebody to go get their child tested for lead. So what we do is we encourage them to get their children tested for lead. So essentially, we will go to different communities and say these issues are symptomatic of a home that may need help. And if you are within a certain income, then we've got a program that may be able to help you. So we seek out the clientele that way.
But how did you find that house? That's what I mean. How do you get to this house to even start implementing anything?
Right. Well, part of the reason we're part of the PwC is because they have a large clientele.
They your program.
Yeah, they have a large clientele.
Okay, now I got it.
Yeah, so as I was kind of saying before, when you've got old housing stock and you have people with limited disposable income, I mean, a lot of PwC's clientele may fit into that.
Yes.
So we're kind of killing two birds with one stone. So we're going to their clientele, but they do intake for the whole program.
Okay. So y'all the intake.
Yeah.
Oh, I got you now.
And our other departments, our other crews that are going out and doing home repairs or assistance, they keep an eye on the client. So if they see somebody who's got a child in a home and they see lead paint, falling away everybody, they instruct people to call in and apply for the program. And
yeah, and I mean, I drive around with, I've got door hangers. If I drive by a house that looks like it could use help, I'll hang one at the door. And a lot of times, we'll do a house in a neighborhood, and the neighbor on either side is like, well, what's going on here? So, we're doing this program, and a lot of times they have lead issues. And it can be anything. It can be as small as, there's one door in the house that, has lead. If we can get rid of that and get that house into a position where that's no longer an issue, then that's a win for us. So
are you saying that the law does not currently require you to report where circumstance may involve lead?
Oh, no. I'm just saying that we don't tell parents to go get their children lead tested. I think the health department, you guys are the only ones that can actually.
But you don't have any legal obligation to report your observations that there are children in the household, for instance?
I don't know. I'll think about that. I mean, what we do, just in general, is if we find a home where there are lead issues, then we we address those lead issues. But at the end, the owner is also required to disclose that at any time if they're going to sell or lease. So from that perspective, then we do kind of do that on the back end because that has to be disclosed through the transaction.
I'll kind of piggyback on that a little bit. There's nothing that, they're not going to throw a parent in jail if they don't get their child tested for lead. So we can recommend it. We can, it's state law for Medicaid eligible children to get their children tested. And, the insurance companies work with us to try to make sure those numbers are met. But we don't have anything that, no fines, no nothing to a parent who just doesn't go get their child tested. So, all we can basically say is we're going to be doing work in your house, or, you have a child who's under the age of 6 and we see lead hazards. We recommend you go get your child tested, and these are our reasons why. We can't force them. We got their teeth in that battle.
I have two questions. The first has to do on this thing in a more of a community perspective. And I can only do that through a specific example. Back in about the year 2006, the city, and I don't know if it was your department or the health department, gave a